The sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden glow over the dense forest, as 5 young women drove along the winding dirt road, leading to their weekend escape. Lush green trees towered over them on either side, their leaves rustling softly in the breeze. The atmosphere was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, a welcome change from the polluted air of the city. Sophia, the leader of the group, sat in the driver's seat, her long dark hair whipping against her face as she rolled the window down. She was the one who had planned the entire trip, a weekend of camping, swimming, and drinking under the stars. Next to her, Mia adjusted her sunglasses and checked her reflection in the rearview mirror, her blonde hair shimmering in the sunlight. "I can already feel my stress melting away," Mia sighed. "No traffic, no work, just nature and freedom." "Exactly," Emily chimed in from the back seat. She was the most adventurous of the group, always seeking new thrills. "We're going to have the best time ever. Just imagine. Late-night swims, bonfires, and lots of alcohol," Jessica interrupted, laughing. "I hope you guys brought enough." Rachel, the quietest of the 5, smiled but said nothing. She was the only one who had done any research on the area they were visiting. Unlike her friends, she wasn't entirely comfortable with the idea of camping so deep in the forest, but she hadn't wanted to be the one to spoil the fun. As the car navigated the narrow road, they finally reached their destination, a secluded lake surrounded by towering trees and a thick fog hovering over the water's surface. The sight was breathtaking, almost unreal. The lake's surface was smooth and glassy, reflecting the fading light of the sky like a mirror. "This is perfect," Sophia declared as she parked the car. They stepped out, stretching their legs and inhaling the fresh air. The silence was profound, only broken by the distant chirping of birds and the gentle lapping of water against the shore. "All right, ladies," Sophia clapped her hands together. "Let's set up camp before it gets dark." The women worked together, pitching their tents near the lake's edge. Jessica struggled with the tent poles while Mia took selfies, documenting their little adventure. Emily, always eager to prove herself, helped Rachel gather firewood, though she occasionally got distracted chasing butterflies. After an hour, their camp was ready. 2 large tents, a small bonfire in the center, and a cooler filled with drinks. As twilight settled over the forest, they changed into their swimsuits, eager to cool off in the lake. Mia dipped her toes into the water first. "It's cold," she gasped, but that didn't stop her from wading in deeper. Soon, all 5 of them were laughing and splashing around in the lake, their bodies illuminated by the last traces of sunlight. The water was refreshing, but Rachel couldn't shake off the eerie feeling creeping up her spine. There was something unsettling about the way the lake stretched out into the darkness, its depths unknown. "This place feels different," she muttered, mostly to herself. "You're overthinking it," Sophia teased, floating on her back. "Just relax and enjoy yourself." Rachel forced a smile and nodded. Maybe she was just being paranoid. As night fell, the women changed back into their clothes and gathered around the fire. The flames crackled, casting flickering shadows on their faces. They toasted marshmallows, drank wine, and shared ghost stories, each tale more ridiculous than the last. It was then that they heard the sound of rustling in the trees. A figure emerged from the darkness, a frail old man, his face weathered and sunken, his eyes sharp with warning. He stood at the edge of their campsite, his bony fingers clutching a wooden staff. "Leave," the man said, his voice rasping. "Leave before it's too late." The laughter died instantly. Mia and Jessica exchanged nervous glances while Emily, always the bold one, stood up. "Excuse me," she said, raising an eyebrow. The old man stepped closer, his gaze locking onto each of them. "This lake, it's cursed. You shouldn't be here," Sophia scoffed. "Oh, come on. Are you serious? That's just a legend, right?" The man didn't blink. "People disappear here, drowned, taken. No one ever finds their bodies. If you stay, you will suffer the same fate." Rachel's stomach twisted. She had read about the legend of the lake, but she had assumed it was nothing more than a ghost story meant to scare off trespassers. Now, standing face to face with this man, she wasn't so sure. Jessica rolled her eyes. "All right, Grandpa, we get it. Now, if you don't mind, we're trying to have a good time." The man's gaze darkened. "You should have left when you had the chance," he muttered, before turning and disappearing into the forest. A heavy silence settled over the group. "Well, that was weird," Mia said, forcing a laugh. "Just some crazy old man trying to scare us," Sophia added. "Forget him." Rachel, however, couldn't shake off the growing dread creeping into her chest. As the fire crackled and the stars blinked overhead, none of them realized that their fate had already been sealed. The morning sun rose over the dense forest, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. The lake's surface shimmered like liquid glass, reflecting the breathtaking beauty of the wilderness. Birds chirped in the distance, and the air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. Sophia was the first to wake up. Stretching inside her tent, she took a deep breath, savoring the fresh air. It was a stark contrast to the polluted city air she was used to. She stepped outside and took in the peaceful sight of the still lake. For a brief moment, she forgot about the old man's ominous warning from the night before. It was just superstition, she told herself. One by one, the rest of the group stirred awake. Mia groaned as she rolled over in her sleeping bag. "Ugh, I feel like I slept on a pile of rocks." "That's because you didn't lay your mat properly," Emily teased, already up and fixing her hair. "Come on, let's make some breakfast." Jessica and Rachel emerged from their tents, still looking sleepy but excited for the day ahead. They gathered around the fire pit, rekindling last night's flames. Soon the smell of sizzling bacon and eggs filled the air, accompanied by the comforting sound of coffee brewing over the fire. "So, what's the plan for today?" Rachel asked as she sipped her coffee. Sophia grinned. "Swimming, hiking, sunbathing, and just having the best time of our lives." "Sounds like a dream," Mia said. "Let's eat up and get started." After finishing breakfast and cleaning up, the girls changed into their swimsuits. The sun was now high in the sky, casting warm rays upon the lake. The water looked incredibly inviting, cool and undisturbed. Emily was the first to dive in, breaking the silence of the lake with a loud splash. "Oh my God, it's perfect." Mia and Jessica followed, giggling as they waded into the water. Sophia hesitated for a moment, taking in the vast, deep expanse of the lake. A strange feeling stirred in her stomach, but she shook it off and jumped in. Rachel, however, stayed back. She sat on the shore watching her friends laugh and play. Something about the water unsettled her. Maybe it was the old man's words still lingering in her mind. Maybe it was the eerie silence beneath the surface. "Come on, Rachel," Mia called out. "The water's amazing." "I'll join you guys in a bit," Rachel lied, forcing a smile. Instead, she picked up her camera and began snapping pictures of her friends, the trees, the distant mountains. Through the lens, everything looked normal, beautiful even. But when she glanced back at the lake with her own eyes, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them from beneath the surface. After an hour of swimming, the girls returned to shore, drying off and basking in the sun. Jessica pulled out a bottle of wine and passed it around. Laughter filled the air as they reminisced about past adventures and talked about their dreams. But the cheerful atmosphere was soon interrupted. Rachel, who had wandered a bit into the forest to take more pictures, suddenly heard rustling nearby. She froze. The trees around her swayed slightly, but there was no wind. It felt as if something, or someone, was there. "Hello?" she called out, her voice barely above a whisper. Silence. Then, just as she was about to turn back, she saw it. A figure, just beyond the trees. Tall, gaunt, motionless. Rachel's breath hitched. It was too far to make out any details, but something about it was deeply unsettling. It wasn't the old man from last night. This figure was taller, darker, its outline almost blending with the shadows of the forest. She blinked, and it was gone. Her heart pounded as she stumbled backward, nearly dropping her camera. Without wasting another second, she turned and ran back to the campsite. When she arrived, her friends immediately noticed the panic on her face. "Rachel," Sophia frowned. "What's wrong?" Rachel hesitated. She didn't want to scare them. Maybe she had imagined it. Maybe it was just a trick of the light. "Nothing," she finally said, forcing a chuckle. "I just thought I saw something." Emily rolled her eyes. "Are you still thinking about what that old man said?" "No, Don't let it get to you," Jessica said, sipping her wine. "This place is gorgeous. No way am I letting some creepy story ruin our weekend." Rachel nodded, but the unease in her stomach didn't fade. She glanced back at the tree line, half expecting to see the figure standing there once more. But there was nothing. For now. As the afternoon wore on, the girls decided to take a short hike before dinner. They followed a narrow trail that wound through the forest, leading to a small cliffside overlooking the lake. The view was stunning, water stretching endlessly, bathed in the golden hues of the setting sun. They took pictures, laughed, and forgot, at least for a little while, about anything that had unsettled them earlier. As the sun dipped below the horizon, they made their way back to camp, ready for another night of food, drinks, and ghost stories. Little did they know, their first night was just the beginning. Something was watching them, and it was waiting. The night had settled in, and the fire crackled in the heart of their campsite. The girls huddled around, wrapped in blankets, passing around a bottle of whiskey and telling ghost stories. The moon was high, casting an eerie glow upon the still lake, which now seemed darker than before. Rachel, still unsettled from her earlier experience, remained quiet as her friends laughed and talked. Her eyes occasionally flickered toward the tree line, scanning for movement. Though she saw nothing, she could feel something watching them. "All right," Emily grinned mischievously. "Who's up for a late-night swim?" Mia gasped. "Are you crazy?" "It's freezing," Jessica smirked. "Come on, where's your sense of adventure? Let's make it interesting. Last one in has to cook breakfast tomorrow." Without waiting, Emily stood up, stripping down to her swimsuit before running toward the water. The others hesitated for a moment, but soon followed, shrieking as the cold water enveloped them. Rachel once again stayed back. She watched her friends splash and play, but her heart pounded with unease. Then she saw it again, a ripple in the water, far beyond where the girls were swimming. It wasn't a fish. It wasn't the wind. It was something else. Her breathing quickened. "Guys!" Before she could finish, a loud splash erupted from the depths. Something was in the lake. Something was coming. The girls froze, turning toward the source of the sound. The lake was vast and dark, the moonlight barely illuminating its surface. The water rippled unnaturally, moving as though something massive had just disturbed it. "Did you hear that?" Mia whispered. "Probably just a fish," Emily said, though there was uncertainty in her voice. Rachel knew better. She gripped her camera tightly, eyes darting across the lake's surface. She thought she saw movement, a dark, shadowy figure beneath the water. It was there for only a moment before disappearing into the depths. "We should get out," she said, her voice trembling. Jessica scoffed. "Relax, Rach. You're just spooked because of that old man's story." Rachel opened her mouth to argue, but before she could, something brushed against Mia's leg. She screamed. The others turned in panic as Mia scrambled toward the shore, her face pale. "Something touched me. Something's in there." They didn't wait to find out what. All at once, they swam frantically back to the shore, climbing onto the rocky surface, breathless and shivering. Emily, trying to catch her breath, laughed nervously. It was probably just seaweed or a fish. No big deal. But Mia wasn't convinced. No, it was big, and it grabbed me. She lifted her leg, revealing deep red scratches along her calf. The sight of them sent a cold chill through the group. "That's not from a fish," Sophia murmured. Rachel scanned the water again. It was still, too still. Something was down there, watching, waiting. Trying to shake off the unease, they wrapped themselves in towels and returned to the fire. The warmth should have been comforting, but an eerie silence hung over the camp. Even the sounds of the forest, The chirping insects, the rustling leaves, had faded. "I don't like this," Mia admitted, poking at the fire with a stick. "First Rachel sees something in the woods, then this." "It's just our imagination," Jessica insisted. "We're letting fear get to us." Rachel wasn't so sure. She turned to Sophia. "You saw the scratches. Do you really think she imagined that?" Sophia hesitated. "No, but I don't know what to believe." Then, the whispering began. At first, it was so faint they thought it was the wind. But as the moments passed, the voices grew clearer. Low, distant murmurs carried by the night air. Rachel's blood turned to ice. "Do you hear that?" The others nodded, eyes wide. The whispers were coming from the forest. Slowly, the group stood, peering into the darkness beyond the trees. The campfire cast flickering shadows, but beyond its glow, the forest was an endless abyss. "Is someone out there?" Jessica called, her voice shaking. Then, crack. A branch snapped. Something was there. Mia grabbed Rachel's arm. "We need to go inside the tents." Rachel swallowed hard, unable to shake the feeling that they were being surrounded. "We should leave. Now." Emily shook her head. "It's the middle of the night. We can't just..." A loud thump cut her off. Something had fallen nearby, or been thrown. Rachel turned toward the noise and saw a large rock resting at the edge of their campsite. It hadn't been there before. Her heart pounded. "Someone's messing with us." "No," Sophia whispered. "I don't think it's a someone." For the first time, Jessica looked truly afraid. "Get inside the tents. Now." Inside their tents, they huddled close, barely breathing. The whispering continued, growing louder surrounding them. Then came the footsteps. Soft at first. Slow. Deliberate. Rachel clutched her camera, hands shaking. The urge to unzip the tent and look outside was overwhelming, but she was too terrified to move. The footsteps circled the tents. Whatever was out there wasn't human. It was too quiet, too calculated. Then, something dragged its fingers, or claws, against the fabric of the tent. Mia whimpered, covering her mouth to stifle a scream. Then, a deep voice. A whisper that wasn't carried by the wind, but spoken right outside. "Leave." Rachel's stomach twisted. For what felt like hours, they stayed frozen. Eventually, exhaustion overtook them, and one by one, they fell into a restless sleep. When the sun finally rose, the forest felt different. Lighter, less suffocating. But the unease remained. Rachel was the first to step outside. The campsite looked normal, untouched, as if nothing had happened. But then she saw them, footprints, circling their tents. Deep, unnatural, inhuman. A cold realization washed over her. They weren't alone last night. And whatever had been there wasn't gone. Mia, stepping beside her, followed her gaze. "We need to leave. Now." Sophia emerged next, rubbing her arms as if trying to rid herself of an unseen chill. "Maybe it was some animal." Rachel pointed at the footprints. That wasn't an animal. Jessica and Emily joined them, their expressions grim. The night's events were undeniable now. Jessica exhaled sharply. "Let's pack up." No one argued. They gathered their belongings quickly, barely speaking. The sense of being watched hadn't left. If anything, it had grown worse. As they loaded their bags, Rachel took one last look at the lake. Something moved beneath the surface. She didn't wait to see what. "Let's go," she whispered. And with that, they left, the whispers of the forest following them. But the lake was not done with them yet. The morning sun did little to comfort them. The air was still thick with an unnatural silence, as if the entire forest was holding its breath. The only sounds were the rustling of their belongings as they hastily packed their bags. Rachel's hands trembled as she zipped her tent shut. Every time she turned her back to the lake or the trees, she felt an unbearable pressure, like something was watching her, waiting. Mia, who had been quiet all morning, suddenly blurted out, "I don't care what you guys think. There's something wrong with this place." No one argued. Jessica, usually the skeptic, shoved supplies into her backpack. "Let's just get the hell out of here." They worked in tense silence. Each second that passed felt like an eternity. Then, Rachel's head jerked toward the lake. A ripple disturbed the water's surface. It wasn't the wind. Something had moved. "Did you see that?" she whispered. Sophia followed her gaze. "Let's go. Now." They slung their bags over their shoulders and started down the dirt path that led to their car, about a mile away. The faster they moved, the better. They didn't speak. The only sounds were their footsteps crunching against the forest floor and their labored breaths. Rachel tried to ignore it, but she could feel it. Something was pacing them in the woods, keeping stride just beyond the trees. Then came the whispers. Software just like last night. "Stay." Rachel's breath hitched. She turned to see if the others had heard it, but before she could speak, a branch snapped behind them. Mia screamed. They ran. Branches whipped against their faces as they sprinted down the path. Their breath came in ragged gasps. Rachel didn't dare look back. The whispers grew louder, curling around them like unseen hands. "Stay. Don't leave. This is your home now." Their voices overlapped, echoing from every direction. Emily tripped. She crashed to the ground with a cry. "Emily!" Jessica skidded to a stop, grabbing her arm. "Come on!" Rachel turned back and froze. Something stood in the trees just behind them. A dark figure, too tall, too thin. Its head tilted unnaturally, as if curious. It had no face, only darkness where its eyes should be. Rachel couldn't breathe. The others turned and saw it too. Mia choked on a sob. Oh my God. The figure moved, not like a person, not like anything human. It glided, stepping forward without sound. The trees behind it twisted, as though the very forest bent to its will. "Run!" They bolted, adrenaline drowning out everything else. The trail felt longer than before, stretching endlessly, the trees towering higher. Rachel risked a glance back. The figure was gone, but the whispers remained. They burst out of the forest, gasping for air, and stopped. Their car was gone. The dirt lot where they had parked the SUV was empty. "No, no, no," Sophia stammered, running to the spot. We parked right here. We parked right here." Jessica spun around, scanning the area. Did we take the wrong path?" Rachel's heart pounded. "Number, this is where we parked. It's gone." Mia clutched her head. How is that even possible? The realization sank in. The forest didn't want them to leave. And then, a deep guttural growl, not from an animal, from behind them. Rachel turned slowly. The figure stood at the tree line, closer now, watching. And it wasn't alone. Dozens of shadowy figures emerged from the forest. Some were tall and featureless like the first. Others were twisted and malformed, hunched creatures with too long limbs, their mouths stretching in silent screams. The whispers turned into a deafening roar. Then the creatures charged. Screaming, the girls ran. Without a car, their only hope was to reach the main road, if it even still existed. Rachel's legs burned as she sprinted, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders. She could hear the creatures gaining on them, moving impossibly fast. Mia tripped. Rachel skidded to a stop. "Get up! Get up!" Mia's eyes widened in terror as she looked past Rachel. One of the creatures lunged. Rachel grabbed Mia and yanked her forward just as the thing's clawed hands swiped at her back. They ran blindly, lungs burning, until... "Go!" Sophia yelled. They reached the porch, Jessica throwing herself against the door. "Please, please, please!" The door swung open. They tumbled inside. The door slammed shut behind them. Panting, they huddled in the center of the cabin, shaking. Rachel's heart pounded in her ears. The cabin was small, one room, dusty, with old furniture covered in sheets. It smelled of mildew and decay. Is it gone?" Emily whispered. No one dared check. Sophia clutched Rachel's arm. "What the hell is happening?" Rachel shook her head. I don't know. Jessica moved toward the window and hesitated. Then, she screamed. Rachel rushed to her side. The creature stood just beyond the trees, motionless, watching, waiting. They weren't trying to break in. They didn't need to. They had time. We're trapped, Jessica whispered, and the sun was starting to set. Desperation took over. They searched the cabin for anything useful, an old phone, a weapon, anything. Mia pulled open a trunk in the corner and gasped. Inside were photographs, dozens of them, faded and yellowed, depicting groups of young people, laughing, posing by the lake. Rachel's stomach twisted. The people in the photos were all women, just like them. Jessica picked up a newspaper clipping. The headline sent ice through Rachel's veins. Campers vanish without a trace. Authorities close investigation after 10 years. Rachel flipped through the photographs faster now. Some of the pictures were old, dating back decades. But then, her breath caught. A photo of a group of 5 young women. One of them looked exactly like Emily, another like Sophia, like all of them. Mia stumbled backward. Number. That's impossible. Rachel shook her head. It's us. Jessica turned to the others, her face pale. This has happened before. Sophia's voice trembled. We're not the first. A slow creaking sound filled the cabin. Rachel's head snapped toward the door. The handle was turning. No, Mia whimpered. No, no, no. The door burst open. Darkness flooded inside. The figures stepped in. One by one. Rachel screamed. The whispers swallowed them whole. The moment the door burst open, an unbearable coldness swept through the cabin. It wasn't the kind of chill that came from a breeze. It was deeper, wrong, sinking into their bones and pulling the breath from their lungs. The shadowed figures moved forward, gliding over the floor like ghosts. The air buzzed with whispers, overlapping and incoherent, growing louder until they felt like screams inside their heads. Rachel squeezed her eyes shut, her hands pressed to her ears. This isn't real. This isn't real. Then, everything went black. Rachel's eyes snapped open. She was alone. No cabin. No friends. Just the lake. Calm, endless, stretching out before her. The sky above was dark, void of stars or a moon. It felt like she was in a dream, except the ground beneath her feet was solid, and the cold air burned against her skin. Hello? She whispered. No answer. Then, a splash. Slowly, Rachel turned toward the lake. A figure stood in the water. A woman, waist deep, her long black hair dripping over her face. Rachel's breath hitched. The woman lifted her head. Her face was not human. It was hollow, a gaping void where eyes should have been, her mouth stretching too wide in a silent scream. Rachel stumbled backward, her heart hammering. The woman stepped closer, and suddenly, the whispers became clear. We were you once. Rachel's eyes widened. Trapped. Forgotten. Lost to the lake. She shook her head. No, I'm not like you. You are already ours. Pain exploded in her skull. The last thing she saw was the woman reaching for her. Rachel woke to the sound of screaming. Her own. She sat up with a gasp, hands clutching at her throat. Her lungs burned as though she had been drowning. The cabin was gone. She was in the woods, lying on damp earth. The others were beside her, Jessica, Mia, Emily, and Sophia, all waking up at the same time, each one gasping for air, eyes wide with terror. Mia started sobbing. What happened? Where are we? Jessica scrambled to her feet, looking around wildly. Was it a dream? What the hell was that? Sophia's hands trembled as she touched her face, as if making sure she was still real. We were in the cabin, and then she trailed off. No one knew how to finish the sentence. Rachel looked toward the lake. It was still reflecting the sky like a mirror, but something about it had changed. It no longer looked like a place where people swam and laughed. It looked like a grave. "We have to leave," Rachel said, her voice hoarse. Emily turned in circles. "But the car..." Then they saw it, parked exactly where they had left it, untouched, as if it had never been gone. For a long moment, no one moved. It was a trick. It had to be a trick. But what choice did they have? Jessica spoke first. "We run. Get in. Don't stop, no matter what." No one argued. They sprinted. The trees blurred past them, their feet pounding against the dirt. The silence in the woods was worse now, thick and suffocating. But the whispers, those never stopped. "We were you once. Stay. You belong to the lake now." Rachel didn't listen. She kept running. The moment they reached the car, Jessica yanked the door open and threw herself into the driver's seat. The others scrambled inside, locking the doors. Jessica's hands fumbled with the keys. "Come on, come on!" The engine roared to life. Relief flooded Rachel so fast it nearly made her dizzy. Then Mia's voice, barely a whisper. "Guys, the road..." They turned. The narrow dirt road they had driven in on was gone. In its place was an endless stretch of asphalt, perfectly smooth, leading into the distance. This wasn't here before," Emily stammered. Sophia swallowed hard. "Drive anyway." Jessica didn't hesitate. She slammed her foot on the gas. The car shot forward. The farther they drove, the more the forest around them changed. The trees, once lush and green, were now dead, their twisted branches reaching like skeletal hands. The shadows stretched unnaturally long, writhing against the pavement. A warning can be seen that reads, "Welcome to Blackwater Lake, established 1932. Mia covered her mouth. "No, no, no, no." Rachel's hands dug into her seat. "Drive faster." Jessica pressed the gas pedal to the floor. They drove for what felt like hours, but no matter how far they went, the forest never ended. The road never turned. It just stretched on and on, looping into nothingness. They weren't leaving. They were going deeper. Rachel's heart pounded. "Stop the car!" Jessica gritted her teeth. "Are you insane? We have to. Stop the car!" Something in Rachel's voice made Jessica obey. The tires screeched as they skidded to a stop. Rachel turned to the others, her hands shaking. "We were never supposed to leave." Mia let out a strangled sob. "What does that mean?" "It means," Rachel whispered, her throat tightening, "we never left the lake." The words sank in like a stone. Sophia's breathing turned shallow. No, that's not true. We're in the car. We're awake. This is real." Rachel's vision blurred. "Then why can't we leave?" The whispers came again. Only this time, they weren't coming from the forest. They were coming from inside the car. Emily let out a shaky breath. "Look in the mirror." Jessica's hands trembled as she adjusted the rear-view mirror. They saw themselves. And then, the reflection changed. Rachel let out a choked scream. Their faces, their eyes were missing. Their skin was rotting, peeling away to reveal darkness underneath. They weren't human anymore. "We were you once." Rachel slammed her hands over her eyes. No, this isn't real." She reached for the door handle, and the world ripped apart. Rachel woke up gasping. She was back at the lake. The water was calm, the air was cold. The others lay beside her, motionless. Panic clawed at her throat. No, wake up!" She shook Mia, then Emily, then Sophia. But they didn't stir. Then, Jessica's eyes opened. Only, they weren't hers. The black void inside them swallowed everything, and she smiled. "Stay," she whispered. Rachel screamed as the others' eyes flickered open, all of them now hollow, consumed by the lake. She stumbled back. "This isn't real. It isn't real." The whispers wrapped around her like a noose. She turned to the water and saw them. Hundreds of figures standing in the lake. All the others who had come before. Doomed to stay. Doomed to become part of the lake. The last thing Rachel saw was the water rising, pulling her under. The final whisper echoed in her ears. "Welcome home." Rachel opened her eyes. The lake was gone. The forest was gone. She was standing in a vast empty space, dark and endless, stretching beyond comprehension. The air felt thick, pressing against her skin like unseen hands. She tried to move, but her legs felt like lead. Then she heard them. The whispers. "You never left." Rachel turned sharply. The others stood beside her, their faces pale, eyes hollow. Mia clutched her arms. "What is this? Where are we?" Jessica's voice came out hoarse. "I don't know." Emily started crying. We were at the lake. I remember running. I remember the car." Sophia's breath was shallow. "But we never left. Did we?" Rachel's chest tightened. "No." The realization settled over them like a suffocating fog. They were still here, still trapped. The darkness around them began to shift. Rachel felt something cold creeping up her legs. She looked down, and her feet were sinking into water. Black, endless water. Mia let out a strangled scream. "No! No, no, no! It's pulling us back!" Rachel struggled, but the more she moved, the deeper she sank. The others thrashed beside her, their hands clawing at the emptiness. But there was nothing to grab onto. The whispers grew louder, filling her ears, pressing into her skull. "You belong to the lake. You were never meant to leave." The water rose to her waist. Cold. Empty. Endless. Jessica sobbed. "Please! Somebody help us." No one answered. No one ever would. The water swallowed them whole. Rachel didn't scream. She couldn't. She fell through darkness, weightless, sinking deeper and deeper until there was no difference between herself and the void. Then, Rachel gasped, her lungs burning. And suddenly, she was standing by the lake. The sun was high in the sky. Birds chirped. The air was warm. A gentle breeze rustled the trees. Behind her, the others were laughing, setting up their tents, unloading their bags. Mia turned to her with a smile. "Rachel, are you okay?" Rachel froze. Mia's face was bright, her eyes full of life. Not sunken, not hollow, not dead. Emily was stretching her arms, humming to herself. Sophia was fixing her ponytail, looking at the water. Jessica was adjusting her sunglasses, grinning. "Come on, let's go swimming before the sun goes down." Rachel's mouth went dry. No. This wasn't real. This wasn't right. "We were you once." The whispers curled around her like smoke. Rachel's heart pounded as she turned toward the lake. The water was calm, inviting, reflecting the sky. She took a step back, but the lake pulled. She could feel it, deep in her chest, calling her, welcoming her home. She opened her mouth to scream, but nothing came out. The cycle had begun again, just as it had before, just as it always would. Because the lake didn't just take, it made them forget. It made them start over, again, and again, and again, until there was nothing left of who they once were. Only echoes, only whispers. The lake remained, waiting, always waiting, for the next, for the lost, for the ones who would never leave, for the ones who would never be found. They were always doomed, trapped in an endless loop with no escape. The lake erases their memories and forces them to relive their fate, forever.